Officer Ray Turner had seen car wrecks before. 14 years on the force will show a man more twisted metal and broken glass than he ever wants to remember. But nothing prepared him for what he pulled up to on Route 9 that rainy October night. A minivan wrapped completely around a tree, folded almost in half, gasoline pooling beneath it in the headlights of his cruiser, and inside it, a woman trapped behind the wheel, and in the back seat, a little girl no older than 6, crying, calling for her mother, completely unable to move. Ray had radioed for fire and rescue the second he saw the wreck. But looking at the twisted frame of that van, at the fuel spreading closer to the sparking wires under the hood, he knew in his gut that fire and rescue might not make it in time. He says he did the only thing he knew how to do in that moment. He got down on his knees in the wet gravel beside that burning hot engine block, and for the first time in almost 20 years, Ray Turner prayed out loud. What happened in the next 90 seconds is something he has repeated to his own department, to news reporters, and now to you because he says the world needs to hear it. This is Officer Ray Turner's story. Struggle or pain, Ray hadn't always been a man who prayed. He grew up going to church because his mother made him, but by the time he became an adult, faith had quietly slipped away, the way it does for a lot of people who spend their careers seeing the worst parts of the world up close. 14 years of domestic disturbances, fatal accidents, overdoses, and violence will do that to a man. Ray used to say, half joking to his fellow officers, that if there really was a God watching over this world, he had a strange way of showing it. His marriage had quietly suffered under the weight of the job, too. His wife, Diane, used to beg him to go back to church with her and their 2 kids on Sundays. He usually found an excuse. Overtime, exhaustion, a general sense that after everything he'd seen on the job, sitting in a pew singing songs felt disconnected from the reality he lived in every single day. That October had already been a hard month. Ray had responded to a fatal crash just 2 weeks earlier involving a teenager, a crash he hadn't been able to get out of his head since. He'd started sleeping poorly, snapping at his kids over small things, carrying a heaviness he didn't fully understand and definitely didn't know how to talk about. So when the call came in that rainy night about a single vehicle accident on Route 9, Ray was already running on empty, emotionally and physically, before he even arrived on scene. But nothing about his exhaustion mattered the moment he saw that minivan wrapped around the tree, headlights still on, steam and smoke curling up from a crumpled hood that was far too close to a growing pool of gasoline. He could hear the woman inside, dazed, calling weakly for help. He could hear the little girl in the back seat, crying, saying, "Mommy," over and over, her small voice cracking with fear. Ray tried the driver's door. It wouldn't budge, crushed into the frame. He tried the back door where the little girl sat, also jammed shut. He radioed again, his voice tighter this time, urging fire and rescue to hurry, knowing full well they were still several minutes out on wet, backed-up roads, and the gasoline kept spreading. And sparks kept flickering from somewhere under that crushed hood. Prayer or faith? Moment Ray says he doesn't fully know what came over him in that moment. Later, when people asked him to explain it, the best he could offer was that something bigger than his own training took over. He got down on his knees in the wet gravel, right beside that ticking, smoking engine block, with fuel pooling just a few feet from where he knelt, and he prayed out loud, right there in the rain, his voice shaking. "God, I know I haven't talked to you in a long time. I know I probably don't deserve to ask you for anything right now. But there is a little girl in this car, and her mother, and I cannot get them out on my own. Please, God, if you're real, if you're listening, I need your help right now. Please don't let this end the way it looks like it's about to end." "Please," he says as he said those words. Something in him steadied. His hands, which had been shaking from adrenaline, went still. His mind, which had been racing, cleared into a strange, sharp focus. He stood back up, walked to the back of his cruiser, grabbed the heaviest tool he had, a simple metal pry bar, and turned back toward that little girl's door with a strength and calm, he says, felt like it wasn't entirely his own. "I don't know how to explain it," Ray says. "It was like something took the panic out of me and replaced it with this steady, quiet certainty. like I wasn't alone out there anymore. Ray wedged the pry bar into the crumpled seam of the back door and pulled with everything he had. Under normal circumstances, a door bent that badly should have taken specialized rescue equipment and multiple people to force open. Ray, alone, in the rain, on a dark road, felt the metal groan and then, astonishingly, give way all at once, popping open with a force that nearly knocked him backward. He reached in, unbuckled the little girl, and pulled her free just as the first crackling pop echoed from beneath the hood. He grabbed her, turned his body to shield her, and half ran, half stumbled several yards back from the vehicle. He turned back toward the driver's side, where the mother was still trapped, and in that same instant, he says he watched something happen that still gives him chills every time he retells it. The driver's door, crushed and jammed just moments before, was suddenly being pushed open from the inside, as if whatever had been holding it shut had simply released. The woman, dazed but conscious, crawled free just seconds before flames fully engulfed the front of the vehicle. Fire and rescue arrived less than a minute later to find Ray sitting in the wet grass on the shoulder of the road, the mother and daughter both safely beside him, all three of them soaked, trembling, and completely unharmed, while the minivan behind them burned down to little more than a smoking frame. The fire chief who arrived on scene later told Ray, off the record, that in his professional opinion, based on how quickly that vehicle had gone up, there was no reasonable explanation for how all three of them had made it out in time. He'd seen fuel fires move faster than that door should have opened, faster than any two people should have been able to escape. Ray doesn't try to over-explain it with technical details anymore. He simply says what he knows to be true. He prayed a prayer he barely believed he had any right to pray, and within 90 seconds, in a situation where every second mattered, doors that should not have opened, opened. And 3 lives that very easily could have been lost that night were not. Emotional resolution. The mother and daughter Ray pulled from that van. Carmen and her daughter Sophia were treated for minor injuries and released from the hospital that same night. Carmen tracked Ray down 2 weeks later, showing up at the police station with a card Sophia had drawn herself, a crayon picture of a police officer standing next to a little girl, with the words, "Thank you for saving me," written across the top in careful 6-year-old handwriting. Ray says he keeps that drawing in his cruiser to this day, tucked into the visor above his seat, where he sees it every single shift. But the miracle that night didn't stop at the roadside. Ray says something inside him changed permanently after that. The heaviness he'd been carrying for years, the quiet distance that had grown between him and his faith, between him and his family, began to soften. He started going to church with Diane and the kids again, not out of obligation this time, but because he found himself wanting to be there, wanting to sit in that quiet space and simply say thank you. He talks openly now, to his fellow officers, to anyone who asks, about what he witnessed that night on Route 9. Some of them believe him completely. Some of them raise an eyebrow, chalk it up to adrenaline and coincidence. Ray doesn't need anyone else to be convinced. He knows what he prayed, and he knows what happened in the 90 seconds that followed, and that knowledge is enough for him. I spent almost 20 years thinking I had seen too much to still believe in miracles, Ray says. That night taught me I hadn't seen too much. I'd just stopped looking for God in the middle of it. He was there the whole time. I just had to get on my knees in the gravel to remember it. Inspirational ending. Maybe you're watching this today, and somewhere along the way, life has worn your own faith thin too. Maybe you've seen too much heartache, carried too much weight, walked through too many hard seasons to fully believe that God still shows up in dramatic, undeniable ways. Maybe, like Ray, you've quietly drifted from the kind of prayer that used to come easily to you. Ray's story is a reminder that God does not require a perfect, unshaken faith before he chooses to move. Ray knelt down in that gravel with nearly 20 years of doubt behind him, and he still prayed the most honest prayer of his life. And God met him exactly there, in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the danger, in the middle of his doubt. You don't need to have it all figured out to bring your need to God. You don't need to have attended church every Sunday, or prayed every day, or lived a perfect life. You simply need to be honest, to kneel down wherever you are, in whatever mess surrounds you, and ask, if you are carrying a weight today, if life has worn down your belief in miracles, consider this your reminder that miracles are still happening. In hospital rooms, in parking lots, on the side of rainy highways, in the ordinary moments of ordinary people who simply chose, in their most desperate hour, to pray anyway. Because sometimes, the door that should never open, opens. The fire that should have taken everything takes nothing. And the man who thought he'd seen too much to believe gets down on his knees in the gravel and remembers exactly who has been watching over him all along.